Okay, thank you. So just a quick overview on what we're doing to prepare for BMSB. And I'm just going to talk at a national level. So first of all, I just wanted to highlight that brown mum-rated stink bug, BMSB as we call it, it's not new. I mean, it's been around for a while. In the US, they've probably been fighting this for close on 20 years. So there's this significant international research program that is out there, and more recently some efforts in Europe, as well as in the native range of Asia, which Grace was alluding to. So our first point in our readiness program is to make sure we're linked in with what's going on offshore. And this is why Stu was visiting these key researchers over in these areas, and we had some of them out here a couple years ago as well. Oh, and we had Anne Nelson out here at this very meeting last year. So then we have our national New Zealand level of preparedness. And we have programs like B3, which is Better Border Biosecurity. It's a plant biosecurity initiative of researchers from many of the Crown Research Institutes doing a lot of research. We also have the CRIs themselves, Plant and Food, Scion, etc., doing their own initiatives. We have MPI, who do some work on their own on either risk assessment or operational research as well, better control tools at the border, etc. And then we have GIA, which is the only part I'm going to talk about, which is, we've heard about this before, it's the partnership between MPI and industry. And then where there's gaps for our industry that aren't being picked up in all of this, that's where they get picked up in this Zespri KVH Biosecurity portfolio, and Elaine will be talking about that a bit later. So that's just to provide some context on how it all fits together. So we have a BMSB council. Sophie mentioned there's 3 multi-sector operational agreements in place. One of them's for fruit fly, one of them's for stink bugs, so we're a part of both of those. The first thing they do is get the paperwork sorted and agree how costs are going to be shared between all the parties, both for a response and readiness, and then set out the work program. The people who sit around that table are basically the horticultural sectors that would be impacted if BMSB were to arrive, and of course MPI Biosecurity New Zealand. Some of the work program that we've been working through various stages. A key component of that is the response plan. What actually would we do if we had this detection here? What does the response look like? Use of netting. This is a current project underway. I'll elaborate on this a little bit more later. The awareness campaign. Hopefully this is familiar to you, and you have seen this either on the internet or as you're coming through the airport, etc. We do both a summer and a winter campaign. And for stink bug, raising that public awareness is really a key part of our defence. We've recently started a surveillance program. This is going to not be nearly as effective as the fruit fly surveillance program. The traps just aren't sensitive enough, but it is much better than nothing. And we've done a pilot last year. It's being rolled out across 80 sites this summer. And we're also working within this portfolio of doing some of our own trapping as well, a bit closer to our main kiwifruit production areas. And long-term management as well. This group hasn't got so much into that space yet. It is more of a focus for the kiwifruit sector, but at a national level we're very much focused on eradication and getting rid of it. So chemicals. Chemicals aren't considered to be a key component of the long-term management program for kiwifruit because of the residue issues they'll create. But for eradication, for really trying to get rid of it, they will form a key part. So we have a technical advisory group who's been advising what chemicals we can use for eradication in New Zealand within our regulatory framework, at what levels, and that's ongoing. This group, the BMSB Council, was the group that got the samurai wasp across the line, so we had the EPA approval for that last year. And there's still very much a lot of work going on in that space. Getting approval was the first step, but now we're figuring out exactly how we would release it, how close to a detection do we need to be, what sort of numbers, etc. This is one of the trials that's going on in the US, where they've got these egg masses on trees and releasing the wasp to see what sort of range it will have. And of course, where we get these wasps from is a big barrier as well. There's no facility in the world that's producing the number that we need. So that's a work in progress. And there's various options being pursued there. Netting, this will be of interest to kiwifruit growers. I think in Italy we're seeing this as a key way of excluding the pest and protecting your crop. 5-sided netting around the orchard, which is basically an extension of hail netting. It keeps about 80% of the bugs out, it seems. Doesn't keep all of them out. The smaller ones seem to get in. But there are various options as well. So I'll show you a kiwifruit orchard later, which is your typical kind of scenario, an extension of the hail netting that we're familiar with. But some of these other crops like pipfruit and citrus shown here are netting individual trees. And then we have on the right here what we call a ghost net. And that's because the white versions look a bit like a ghost. And they are actually soaked in insecticide and have a lure attached. So they're drawing the bug in and actually working as a lure and kill method. Simon mentioned that one of the best ways for preparedness is getting out there and actually seeing it for yourself. And the council is investing in this approach as well and sending people offshore to where the battle against BMSB is going on, basically. Those who were at KiwiNet at our last meeting would have heard Kath Duthie from MPI was talking about her recent trip to Georgia. Georgia is one of the only places where they're actually trying eradication against BMSB. They are doing some quite interesting things, and they've got social engagement with people. These face-to-face meetings, getting communities on board is really a key part of that program. And I'll show you in a minute why the reason it's so effective, but or so important. But also this slide, or that middle photo, they've actually soaking bed sheets in insecticide as well, and it's basically like a DIY ghost trap. A sheet soaked in insecticide, hung out on people's fence and put the lure on as well. I don't know if we could do that within our regulations, but it's what they're doing over there. So this is the reason why they need social license, because they're driving trucks through the towns and doing mass fumigation, if you like. And you've got to have public on site if you want to attempt that. They've got a huge amount of foreign aid to help with this program. And they've got text alert systems that go out to these communities, tell them when the trucks are coming, put your dogs and your cats inside, and the trucks come through. So it's quite an interesting approach. It's probably not one we're going to mirror in New Zealand, but it's very good to see what they're doing. More recently, Nicola Robertson, who's the pipfruit representative on the council, went over to Italy. She was looking at long-term management as a bit of a report back to the council to see what they're doing there. I'm sure many of you have heard that Italy is having significant challenges with the pest this season. They're seeing up to 100% loss in some of the pear orchards, and that's pretty widespread, 50% in apples, and a bit lower, 30% on some of the worst kiwifruit blocks. Chemical control is different. We've heard this before. The pests fly away and then come back later. And really the management approach there, they see, needs to be tailored depending on the environment that you're growing your crops in. And netting is playing a key role, and that's the kiwifruit kind of orchard protected by netting there.